At the point at which there's like an implication that someone's had premarital sex, we just wouldn't talk about it at all.
You're supposed to see it as something that, to put it funnily, God witnesses.
That if the partner is not sexually satisfied, this is a legitimate ground to divorce.
Australia is home to around 600,000 Muslims, and nearly half of them are under the age of 24. For those who are religious, their teens and 20s mightn't be a time for dating or promiscuity, but instead the age when they start looking for a life partner, often with the help of family and friends. I'm Siobhan, and I'm a religion and ethics reporter for the ABC, and I want to find out what halal courtship looks like, and see if Muslims' spirituality affects their sexuality. What does Islam say about intimacy? So we are going to meet a young Muslim man called Steve who is married. He's been married previously, but he's comfortable talking me through what courtship looks like in the faith and, you know, the role of intimacy in a marriage and how it can have a spiritual dimension to it.
When it comes to courtship in Islam, you always have to go on with an intention for long-term commitment to that person. And that's how it starts. Would you like to know about the process and all that?
Yeah, I'd love to, yeah.
Generally speaking, people refer others, hey, I know a brother or a sister that's really nice, I think you guys are a good match. And usually they'd go to the girl first, get her consent. There's a misconception they're forced into marriage, that's cultural. Islamically, if a woman is forced with God, God refuses to accept a marriage himself. If they like each other, the young man will go through the front door. He'll go to meet the father and say, I'm interested in your daughter, can I talk to her with your permission? So there's that respect of the father. Behind the scenes, Muslim dads go to the mum and they say, what do you think of this guy? You've got that woman's intuition thing happening. That's usually what I've seen. And the mum will be like, oh, my heart feels good about him. Can't translate it well in Arabic, but that's what they'd say.
If the mum and dad are on board, the families have something called a Fatiha. It's where they recite the first chapter of the Quran. And everyone knows the couple intends to wed. Next, there's a religious ceremony. The couple are Islamically but not legally married.
Culturally, they call it an engagement. And then that way, at that point, they're quote unquote halal for each other, which I know it's used for food, but the term is, it's not used appropriately a lot of the time. It means they're permissible for each other, which means should they want to hug, you know, kiss, be intimate, she can take off her scarf in front of him and show whatever is beautiful of her to him.
Why do you think it's important to save sex for marriage?
I think there's a great emphasis on maintaining one's control over their appetites. Like you find in Islam, when we pray, it's divided in 5 daily prayers. There's a whole month where we fast. These are all trainings to keep us basically in charge of our bodies. It's impermissible for a man to have an extended gaze on a woman and then like lustfully look at her, which I think is a common notion in Christianity as well. That I think it was Jesus that said that the first type of adultery is with the eye. We have a religion where our prophet would see a woman walking and he'd cross the road and give her space. These are the ethics of our prophet.
Steve, as a Muslim man, do you feel like there's a spiritual sense to your sexuality?
I think where spirituality and sexuality intertwine is that the key of spiritual practice is avoiding the distractions of the body. For example, one can't worship if they're severely tired, so you should rest before you pray, for example. When it comes to distractions of the body, they are unnatural urges, and if they're not expressed, the energy builds, it causes a frustration in the system, and then it distracts you from other things. Intimacy can be considered an act of worship, even to the extent there are etiquettes before you even approach intimacy. You know, for example, we have narrations that say, one, you know, perform an ablution beforehand, say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the most gracious, most merciful, before you enter the bedroom. Now, we do ablution before prayer. And then there's a recommendation to do an ablution before intimacy with one's spouse. So Islam will never teach that you have to restrain your desire completely and annihilate it. It will tell you it should be managed. It must be expressed, but it needs to be managed. So you tame the animalistic being that's within, you tame the beast inside, so to speak. Only at that point your spiritual heart can actually perceive God.
You know, for Kesteven, I feel like spirituality and sexuality kind of go hand in hand. But I'm sure that there are other Australians who've been raised Muslim who maybe haven't had it as easy, and I'd like to get one of their experiences. Writer Zoya Patel is one of those Australians. She grew up in a Muslim family where dating during school was a hard no, and modern arranged marriage was normal.
Your match would have to meet certain criteria. So you would absolutely need to be with a Muslim, preferably one from the same culture as you, so preferably Indian. And then if you want to get like really fine-tuned, ideally from the same part of India, or Fijian Indian, which is my family's particular background. Dating was just not even a factor, and it would have been very scandalous to date. And sex as a result wasn't really something that was discussed because you weren't meant to be having sex before marriage, so why would you need to talk about it?
If you cast your mind back to your teenage and young adult years, do you remember getting much of a sex education?
I think I was given so little to really understand sexual relationships with that I didn't even think about that. Not only was I raised Muslim, but the primary kind of cultural artifacts that I got to engage with were like Bollywood movies. And back then, you didn't even kiss in a Bollywood movie, and any implication of sex was just like a fade to black. So even in my daydreams, you know, at the point at which in my daydream I'd be with a guy and it'd be so exciting, I would literally fade to black. Like I didn't know how to like imagine what sex would be like. And part of our kind of religious upbringing meant that we would never purchase magazines like Dolly or Girlfriend or anything like that. Like those things were considered so kind of crass and like inappropriate for our age. So I didn't even have like Dolly Doctor to look at. But I find it interesting now because I don't feel that I didn't know about my body. Like I still feel as if I knew what I needed to know, and I gradually kind of came to the rest of my education kind of naturally and organically. And the positive thing is it didn't occur to me to think that I wasn't normal or to question my body. I remember getting to university and there was an article in the student newspaper about women embracing the different labias that we all have, and how like there's no one way a vagina should look. And I remember being like, I honestly didn't even know that I could question this. Like I just assumed it was fine.
There's a lot of stigma in many Muslim communities around sex and even sex education, but I've been in touch with an academic who's Muslim herself, and she says it's actually incumbent upon them to learn about sex and, you know, not be ignorant around those kind of topics. Hi Fida, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Siobhan?
Fabulous. Fida, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about sex and Islam?
Biggest misconception is that we need to remain silent about it. Once we've crossed over that, you'll find that a lot of the other misconceptions are those that are clearly underpinned by cultural perspectives and not religious perspectives. And the two are conflated.
Fida, in Islam, why is sex outside of marriage considered haram?
Because Islamic law preserves not only the individuals but also society as a whole. And so if issues of promiscuity, for example, or fleeting encounters or engagement with sexuality outside of marriage, it could actually disrupt that family network.
And because sex outside of marriage is considered haram, what is permissible within marriage, to most people's surprise, is quite an open book. Am I allowed to be explicit?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Foreplay is absolutely essential, and it is both the expectation and the responsibility of both the husband and the wife.
There's lots of hadith that talk about that in terms of etiquette, on how to approach your wife, how to approach your husband. Lots of cuddling, lots of kissing, lots of sexual gestures, all of that touching is imperative. And it goes back, I should say, that because Islam recognises that sexuality is and sexual desire is a need. It is not a want, it is actually a need. And so that we have explicit teachings and learning about how to accommodate for those needs. Fellatio is permissible in Islam, but again, it has to be surrounded by consent. Mutual masturbation is okay as well, again, if it is consensual. But strongly and strictly forbidden is anal sex.
Again, because of the issue of etiquette.
For Muslim married couples, how does equality in the bedroom fit in?
When you shed cultural implications and cultural influences on this topic, you'll see that Islam really presents a very equal playing field and makes it very clear that it is such a high degree of right that this also becomes grounds for divorce.